Good morning, everybody. My name is Martin Rojas. I am the Senior Advisor for the Americas at the International Road Transport Union, organization based in Geneva. I'm based in Washington, D.C., so from here, good morning to everybody. I want to point out the first thing you need to do for this webinar is to make sure that you choose your language. On the bottom right of the screen, you'll see two choices for Spanish and English. En español hay una selección que hay que hacer para escoger el lenguaje que quieren usar. Y por favor hagan eso porque tenemos interpretación simultánea. It's a real pleasure for me to host this event on the Nafta, the North American Free Trade Agreement, what it has meant for the last 25 years, and the replacement of the North American Free Trade Agreement, which is, at least in the U.S., the Usmca, CUSMA in Canada, and TEMEC in Mexico. We have over 300 participants today, which is, I think, a very good for our first webinar in North America. Most of our participants are from the region, but we also have participants that are joining us from South America, Asia, the Central Asia, Far East, the Middle East, and of course, some of our European members and colleagues who are joining us today. So welcome to everybody, and it sort of shows the kind of global organization that the RIU is. There are some basic housekeeping rules on the screen that you can go ahead and read for yourself if you want, if you haven't done so already. We're basically just going to have the speakers on screen. Everybody is going to be muted. We're only going to take questions via the chat, and we'll be selecting some key questions from there with the help from my colleagues in Geneva. Let's proceed and move forward. So part of the reason we have 300 attendees today, I think, is really due to the caliber of the speakers that we have. We have three key leaders, and I'll be introducing them later on individually before they make their remarks. But briefly, these are people that have been involved for a long time in the industry and certainly play a big role in the success of NAFTA and NAFTA trucking itself. And I wanted to, to sort of discuss the fact that some people, a lot of people question, and part of the reason why we now have a new agreement is some people believe that NAFTA was not really a beneficial agreement per se, or didn't benefit certain sectors. In my view, in the 25 years that I worked on this issue of NAFTA itself, we certainly believe that the trucking industry was a tremendous beneficiary of NAFTA. If you consider that in 1994, we had about $300 billion in total surface transportation coming across both borders throughout the region, that grew to close to $1 trillion, over $900 billion of surface trade by value that crossed the borders between the United States and Canada, and the United States and Mexico, and the entire region. So those increasing volumes was certainly a benefit to the trucking industry. If you think about it in certain terms, basically about 33,000 trucks cross the international borders of North America each and every day, moving roughly on a yearly basis, about $772 billion, because trucks move close to 70% of the value, of the total value of trade between the U.S. And Mexico and Canada and the entire region. So with that introduction, I just wanted to briefly touch upon some of the key items, get into the weeds a little bit at what the Usmca actually means for the future of North America trade. And there's some key aspects here. One is Chapter 7, which has some specific trade facilitation components, which include anything from improving customs processes, eliminating bureaucratic impediments. That's basically all agencies of government working together, really focusing on some pre-clearance mechanisms. We're already transmitting a lot of the information related to the cargo, the vehicle, and the drivers to customs. Well, then how can we make that work better to speed the release of the vehicles at the borders, and to also create this coordination among the three countries where we can develop not just national single windows for customs and all the agencies, but a sort of a regional single window that is a work in progress. Chapter 15 basically deals with some of the usual things that have created some headaches in the past related to national treatment and most favored nation treatment, typical trade agreement stuff. An important aspect of Chapter 15 is that it also establishes a committee, sort of a public industry committee, so that we can all get together and discuss key items between government and industry and try to resolve some of the outstanding issues and some of the impediments to a more efficient transportation system cross borders. Annex 1, just briefly, also has some issues related to grants of authority. I'm not going to get into the weeds, but certainly if you have any questions about that, you want to get more information, you can contact me. It includes some of the foreign investment prohibitions and stuff like that. And then Annex 2 has this usual headache issue that we deal with on a constant basis since the beginning of NAFTA, which is this limitation on operations and what's reserved for each country and how they operate. So a lot of the same stuff that we had in the old NAFTA, but with certainly some things that everybody could agree to that we needed to modernize that weren't existing in NAFTA, which relate to how do we treat the growing flows of e-commerce? How do we use all the technology that is now available to us to improve the efficiency at the border and continuously automate cross-border traffic? So at some point, we don't even, we can just be fully automated without really even having to stop at the border for any paperwork or any inspections of that sort. We're going to put a brief polling question up. It's going to be a simple question, Laura, if you're ready. And we'd like to get the audience to answer this question. We'll probably have this question at the end again and see if anybody has changed their minds and changed their opinion. But please go ahead and vote, and so we can see the results here as they come up. Question is, do you think USMCA will improve cross-border trade and transportation in comparison to NAFTA based on some of the facts that I just gave you? Laura, how are we doing? You see any results yet?
Yeah. I'm just waiting that people are still answering.
Okay, excellent. I'm sorry that the panelists can't vote. We know your vote already. We know you think it's going to be great. Oh, there we go. So look at that. So this is a positive. In one sense, I was thinking that perhaps most people would think, well, it's basically going to be the same continuing challenges. But I do honestly think that this technology component and this aspect of so much as the agencies working together among the three countries to improve the systems that move the data and release the cargo will come aboard, will be a positive thing. And also the ability, again, to sort of get together with industry and government and the committee that has been established by the USMCA. So with that, I'd like to introduce our first speaker. Our first speaker is Derek Leathers. He is the Vice Chairman, President, CEO of Werner Enterprises. He has over 29 years of experience in the transportation and logistics industry and more than 20 years of leadership experience with Werner. Throughout his tenure at Werner, he has held executive management roles, leading multiple organization service offerings, including the development of Werner's Mexico cross-border operations, oversight for the asset operating groups, and leading the launch of Werner Global Logistics, which includes intermodal, ocean, air, and brokerage transportation services. Prior to joining Werner in 1999, Derek was one of the first 4 members of Mexico's Trucking Association, Canacar, and was based out of Mexico City for several years. He holds an economics degree from Princeton University. And before I let you speak, Derek, I just want to say that, you know, this is sort of a classic thing that we're seeing, in which trucking companies are really truly not only now sort of these asset-based trucking operations only. Companies have had to sort of diversify their services and their operations, and have become sort of integrators of transportation services as they expand their services, and as customers ask them to do more for them. So Derek, thank you very much for being here today, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate you having us. You know, I guess in the way of opening remarks, because I think the meat will be on the bone relative to question and answer and talking through what is on people's minds. You know, I'll start with the obvious. I'm a supporter of USMCA. I think it's a natural evolution. You know, as a way of background, I was working in Mexico City pre-NAFTA, and was living and working there for several years, and then NAFTA came into effect. So I've lived through the launch, and therefore some of the initial controversy around NAFTA, understand some of the sentiment that was existing at that time, all the way up to and including now with what I believe is sort of a NAFTA 2.0, or an evolution of NAFTA, not really a revolution of it, with USMCA. You know, in general terms, I think this is a step forward at a time that it was sorely needed. I think that, you know, if you look at it at a philosophical level, nobody has in their company or their business contracts that are 25 years old, because at some point over those 25 years, they go in and they sit down, and they've either lost the business, or if they still retain it, they update those contracts, whether it's through addendums or renegotiation, and they modernize those contracts. And really, it was time to do that relative to NAFTA. I think, you know, it's easy to forget that when NAFTA took place, this whole concept of intellectual property rights was really a non-issue. You know, labor, you know, kind of parity was much less of a discussion point than it is under USMCA, and trying to work toward a more standardized footprint relative to how we deal with labor and labor resolution issues. Accountability has been improved in USMCA, and the ability for direct and specific actions to be taken. We think that's a positive. But really, the overarching theme for me is, at a time when we've got all this global unrest and all this economic uncertainty, I think a really important question to ask ourselves would be, what if we hadn't resolved USMCA, if we hadn't put that in place? Because at a time when there's a lot of people reconsidering their supply chains and rethinking about where they want to source from, it sure is a positive, in my view, that across North America, we've given them a framework and a footprint of confidence that says, here's the rules of engagement. If you're thinking of nearshoring or resourcing in Mexico or Canada or the US, here's how that might look. Here's the rules that it'll be governed by, and it gives people certainty in a very uncertain time. And so I think it's critically important that we got it put in place. Here at Werner, you know, we've been doing cross-border business since 1999 when I joined the company. It's a huge part of our business. We believe that we're the largest cross-border operator today into and out of the United States as it relates to U.S. transportation companies. And as you mentioned in your opening, you know, customers increasingly are looking for portfolio solutions. You know, they want to work with somebody that can provide them not just a domestic support, but also international support, not just asset, but also non-asset, inclusive of intermodal and other modes. And as we've built that portfolio out, you know, our commitment to Canada and Mexico is strong. And the last statement I'll make is that we've stayed true throughout those, you know, 20 years, now 21 years since our launch, of really leaning into the partners we have in those countries. I believe that, you know, that we can ask the government to intervene on all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, the most efficient path is usually the best one for the customer. And there are quality Mexican carriers across Mexico that we work with and let them do what they do well. In Canada, we do increasingly, or even our Canadian business with Canadian partners. And we do what we do, which is the U.S. portion, and provide through trailer service on both ends. I think that's a formula that for us has proven itself to stand up and stand the test of time. And we're excited about the future with USMCA and some of the clarity that it's providing for not just our business, but more importantly, our customers' business.
Excellent. And by the way, Derek, I know you testified last year at some point. I think it was mid-year at the U.S. Senate in relation to this. And one of the and you made a lot of these points in relation to this. But what is your feeling about how much education we need to do in a sense with government and the general public? We were on a call yesterday with one government organization. And Bob Costello and I were, and we had to do a sort of, it was amazing how little they actually knew about how these operations take place. And here we're talking about an organization that deals with trade. What's your view on that?
Yeah, I think we all need to stay and recognize the importance of talking about the positives of the agreement, because, I told my team at Warner all the time, whether it's relative to USMCA or anything else, bad news has an echo. And so people that have negative views tend to be repeated and tend to be louder than people that are positive or supportive of anything. And bad news has an echo, and good news dies a quick death because it doesn't move the news cycle. And so there's going to be fits and starts. And at the Senate, I would like to believe that although some of the questions that we took from the U.S. Senate and some of the questions and more direct attacks, if you will, that took place during that hearing, I'd like to believe that they were fully educated and it was more politics at play than having that lack of a level of knowledge of some of those basic tenets, because I just don't think you could be in those roles and not have a better feel. I mean, one example would be there was a lot of white noise and controversy around needing to do more to ensure that the labor enforcements in Mexico would take place. And my point at that hearing, and my point to this day, is, let's give Mexico credit for the fact this is the single largest step forward relative to labor rights, labor standards, wage commitments that has been made in a long time. It's a very positive move for the Mexican worker. And while it may not have every single thing in it that every group in the U.S. would like to see, it gives a really solid framework. And, kind of a simple analogy, I think, for things like USMCA is, everybody who moves into a neighborhood, at least in the U.S., has an HOA, a homeowners association. And they always read all the rules of the HOA before they move in, and it gives them all this great comfort that the neighborhood is going to have rules and to live by and general contractual agreements amongst neighbors. And they love it up until the first time they're reminded that their trash can has to be taken back within 8 hours of the trash being picked up. And now all of a sudden they dislike the HOA and they focus on that one negative issue. When in fact, day in and day out, living in that neighborhood is improved by the fact that there's a common agreement amongst neighbors. USMCA is that on steroids, obviously, but that agreement gives stability where otherwise there would be chaos.
Yeah, I would agree that you need a sort of a rules-based, environment in which everybody understands what the rules of the game are and how you're supposed to be operating. So, thank you very much, Derek. We'll come back to you with some further questions further on. Next up is Dan Einwachter. Dan Einwachter is the founder, chairman, and CEO of the Challenger Group of Companies based in Cambridge, Ontario. He's an executive member of the board of directors of the Ontario Trucking Association and the Canadian Trucking Alliance. You're also a former chairman of the North American Transportation Alliance. Dan, we need to throw that in there. Dan got his start in transportation by driving trucks as a teenager, which led to the formation of Transportation Company in 1975 to support his university endeavors. Dan has an honors business degree from Wilfrid Laurier University, Challenger has a fleet in excess of 4,000 trucks and trailers, approximately 600,000 square feet of warehousing. The accumulation of many years of hard work, dedicated employees, a philosophy of continuous improvement is exemplified in Challenger's world-class 53-acre, 126,000 square foot corporate facility. So we're very happy you could join us, Dan, and please take it away.
Thanks, Martin. Hello, everybody. You know in particular, Martin, how important Nafta was to me because we've known each other a long time. It gave us some certainty for our business, and it gave me certainty in my personal life because I met my wife due to Nafta in Mexico City. So it rings a special tone for me, and I still like her, so I'm pretty happy about that.
No extra charge, by the way.
And I'm hoping she doesn't want to go back and renegotiate the contract as Derek suggested, because it's time to revisit those things. So.
You never know. Beware. I hope she's not listening in.
She might have her ear pressed to the door here. I'm not sure. I really don't have much more to add to what Derek has said because he covered it ever so eloquently. I agree 100%. It gives us a framework for efficiency. The old theory is the more you make something easy to do, the more you're going to do of it. The easier it is, the more you'll do. And we've proven that with the numbers you've cited, Martine. We could go off and I could recite a bunch of numbers about trade, but they're pretty standard numbers, growing exponentially. In Canada's case, 70% of our exports, a little more than 70%, go to the United States. 40% of our GDP depends upon trade with the US. So that's a pretty significant issue. We like efficiency. We like the governments trying to get together to interpret and make the flow better. But as we do know at times, we need to Derek's point, we need to stay engaged with those regulatory authorities because as much as they mean well, some of the regulators, they have just enough information to be dangerous. And we can't assume they're going to have our best interests at heart. So we need to constantly be driving home the point about our particular issues. And we don't create, to my right here, I have my iPad with some of my summary notes. And you think about what that did for this, for our North America, for the world economy. The way we communicate, the way we behave, the way we exchange information. They created the demand for that unit. We didn't have it before. They created demand. And trucking is very different. We're not trying to create a demand. We're meeting society's demand. And yet they view us differently, and we need to make sure we're out there in front of them all the time saying, we're only doing what you ask us to do. When Werner started, when Derek started years ago in this business, to your comments that you had made earlier, we started all basically off as a trucking business. We're in the trucking industry. Now we're in the customer service business, using different modes of transportation and technology to meet our customers' many and varied needs. And we need certainty in the regulatory framework. We need efficiency. There are some areas that need to be addressed at the borders, and we can talk about that. But I'll just maybe end it there and say that I'm glad we've improved it, we've changed it. And it's like anything in the trucking industry in North America, we've proven, just give us the rules, make them clear, and we'll work within them. But they can't be vague.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it. Those are really good points. And you sort of triggered a thought, obviously we're living in these extremely, strange times of the COVID-19 and the impact it has on the economies and the contraction on the at a national level and on a regional level of the business environment. And so it's clearly had an impact, because the three countries are so closely interrelated in the integration of their supply chains and in manufacturing, right? That it truly had an impact. So if the factory shuts down in Canada, that will impact, a facility in Detroit, and the same with Mexico, a facility going back and forth. We know cars go back and forth 7 times in their manufacturing process, usually on average, till the final product is ready to go. In that sense, we view USMCA almost starting from anew, right? So we've had this lower trade volume, and it's like we're starting again. It's like we're giving a USMCA a sort of a low bar to start from. But in my view, what are some of if you had the magic wand, what would be the key issues that you'd like to fix on the border, or that would improve your cross-border operation? And what's the key item?
What I would say, and I'm going to say this from a Canadian perspective, crossing the Canada-U.S. border.
Sure.
The more we can take paperwork out of the equation and have seamless paperless flow, especially in COVID, really has driven home that point here now. Depending on who you are and your view of the world, some have more paranoia than others about touching the paperwork and the exchange of information back and forth by that way. We don't need it, quite frankly. Look at the way newspapers have declined in the print. We now do things electronically. So we have the ability to do that on a recurring basis, and we're working towards it. I will say the border is much more efficient now than it ever used to be. So I'm pleased with that, but there's definitely ways to improve it. We have an issue in U.S. and Canada about empty trailer movements in each other's country.
Mm-hmm.
I won't get into it other than it seems it's arcane. It needs to be addressed. We have a shortage of drivers, and this is a major inefficiency. My personal view is 10 years from now, we should have, I would like to see, at least with Canada and the United States, the free flow of labor, trucks, trailers, and drivers, creating an efficient network, taking efficiency out, reducing greenhouse gas emissions. There's a whole host of reasons why that would work. Mm-hmm. But that's just my wish list. I may not be in the industry still by then, but I would like to see the empty trailer movement issue resolved. The U.S. is working on, there's been a constant effort to remove the FET on commercial equipment in the United States. Yeah. It moves forward and doesn't go very far. If that's taken out of the equation, then that would help all equipment be able to work on both sides of the border because they would be equally taxed fairly. Derek, would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. I mean, I agree wholeheartedly with the idea that over time, the more we do to increase efficiencies and lower our collective carbon footprint's a good thing. As I previously stated, and we've already seen some questions popping up about what do we think the future looks like with who's driving where, I still believe fundamentally that there are certain inherent advantages to Mexican carriers operating in Mexico, U.S. carriers operating in the U.S., and Canadian carriers operating in Canada. And obviously with some cross-border exceptions, I'm not looking to limit people to those countries. That's not my point. But I think water finds its easiest path. And just like in the U.S., when we deliver into a port city, we will use a port drayman because they understand the inner workings of that port better. If we deliver into Mexico, if the right solution is a Mexican carrier, and it almost always is, we want to do that. That's our preference. In Canada, similarly, there's many provinces in Canada where I would much rather work with a Canadian partner for that final delivery, but give my customer a seamless trailer and let that trailer be seamless so that you're not unduly transloading, you're not unduly touching freight, you're not risking damages and claims. But over time, I think all of us working to lower our footprint's an important thing because we're only going to continue to get increased attacks relative to environmental impacts of trucking versus other modes. And we've got to be really diligent about doing everything we can to show just how environmentally friendly and efficient a well-ran trucking operation working with good partners can be.
And that's a critical point, Derek. And actually, it's something that we're working very hard in the IRU is this issue of decarbonization and all the aspects, looking at it from a holistic approach, which is everything from, what type of vehicles we need, what kind of fuel we should be using, the congestion issue, how do we improve asset utilization, productivity, you name it, right? I mean, it's like a suite of solutions that we need to look at. Well, thank you both. Let me jump into our last but certainly not least speaker in the group, Mr. Jorge Casares Lopez. We're going to do this in English. Since 2015, Mr. Casares is the Director General of Alianza Trayecto, a strategic alliance between two Mexican carriers, Grupo Transportes Monterrey and Grupo Larmex, and includes over 10 additional companies within the enterprise. Alianza Trayecto has roughly 10,000 equipment units, including tractors and trailers, with over 6,000 employees. Alianza Trayecto offers diversified transportation services to various sectors, including the automotive, petrochemical, temperature control, health products, among others. Mr. Casares is a public accountant by training from the Universidad Autónoma de Nuevo León, and he has a master's degree in addition to finance and organizational specialization degree. So, Licenciado Casares, por favor.
Hello, everyone. I want to thank Martin for the invitation. Derek, good to see you again. And Dan, it is a pleasure to meet you. I hope everyone and everyone's family is okay under this COVID-19 pandemic. I will continue speaking in Spanish to have a more active intervention. Pues bien, hoy después de 26 años de iniciado el TLC definitivamente arroja un balance muy positivo para el autotransporte de carga. Hoy el bloque de América del Norte concentra 490, cerca de los 500 millones de personas, con el 16% del intercambio comercial del mundo. Imaginemos lograr que todos estos insumos para esta población se produjeran en este bloque, traer de Asia y de otras latitudes la producción a esta región del norte, construyendo puentes y acercándonos para ser más eficientes y productivos. Seguiríamos disminuyendo problemas como la migración, mejorando la calidad de vida de todos estos habitantes, y el transporte como columna vertebral de la economía continuaría en franco crecimiento. Así es como lo vemos nosotros de positivo. Nosotros como país, empresarios en México, definitivamente este acuerdo nos retó como sector en aquel lejano 1994, porque históricamente México había tenido una economía cerrada. Entonces el tamaño de las empresas y sus capacidades de producción y comercio eran realmente muy limitadas. Yo recuerdo en mi ciudad había un cliente, una planta productiva que generaba 120 a 150 embarques al mes, y muchos transportistas nos peleábamos por ese cliente. Hoy un solo cliente nos da esos embarques al día. Entonces, la dimensión de esto ha sido exponencial. Este acuerdo comercial nos hizo acelerar el crecimiento de nuestras empresas. Si bien el comercio ha crecido en 7 veces, a empresas como la de nosotros nos ha obligado a crecer en ese mismo tenor de 7, 8 veces su tamaño. Pero lo más importante es que el TLC nos obligó a ser más competitivos y ser competitivos internacionalmente. Hace 20 años o poco más tomamos la decisión de competir con estándares internacionales de calidad, de tamaño y productividad. Por ejemplo, tener una flota de 8.5 años, reducirla a 3.5, creamos programas de seguridad y de capacitación para operadores, invertimos en tecnología. La transferencia de tecnología entre países definitivamente ha sido importante y le hemos dado mucho peso. Hoy los clientes lo toman como una commodity, es decir, el EDI o cualquier otro tipo de intercambio de información. Eso es mandatorio, ¿no? Las exigencias del mercado lo han hecho altamente competitivo y competido también. Nosotros tenemos el honor como transportistas mexicanos de tener socios comerciales y buenos amigos de Estados Unidos y Canadá desde hace más de 20 años. Todos estos acuerdos han sido exitosos porque se basan en principios de respeto, de cumplimiento de acuerdos, visión de largo plazo y siempre el esquema, bajo un esquema de ganar-ganar. Así lo hemos sentido a través de todo este tiempo. Los transportistas de los 3 países, obviamente, como comentaba Derek hace un momento, compartimos visiones muy alineadas y también compartimos dolores de cabeza, como lo que comentaba Dan, la falta de operadores, las sobreregulaciones en algunas áreas, tiempos muertos de nuestras unidades por diferentes razones, y tendremos que seguir trabajando conjuntamente para resolver estos temas. Por otra parte, el TEMEC adiciona un capítulo de medio ambiente, el cual nos emociona, nos congratula, nos reta en materia de ecología, donde los productores de motores han hecho grandes esfuerzos para reducir las emisiones de los contaminantes al medio ambiente y han tenido que repercutirnos esos costos adicionales. Y en esta materia estamos convencidos y hemos invertido en camiones Euro 5 y 6, en camiones a gas que cumplen la EPA 13. Estamos realmente comprometidos. También este acuerdo comercial de América del Norte nos ha motivado a crear una plataforma más amplia de educación para nuestros conductores, para poder cumplir y rebasar las expectativas de clientes de clase mundial. Hemos creado en muchas empresas mexicanas nuestras propias escuelas, adicional que hay 285 centros de capacitación autorizados, donde se capacita a los operadores en la parte técnica, en la parte legal y en algunas de las escuelas también en la parte de valores, que eso es muy importante. A partir del 1 de julio iniciamos con el nuevo acuerdo TEMEC, con un capítulo anticorrupción que nos obliga a robustecer nuestro código de ética al interior de las empresas, lo cual nos parece formidable, nos parece excelente. Con el TEMEC estamos muy entusiasmados porque potencializa el crecimiento de lo logrado con el TLC, con la firme convicción de tener una alianza del transporte de América del Norte. Esa es nuestra visión. Y el transporte en México está listo para afrontar este reto. Tenemos empresarios en el sector muy comprometidos con la calidad y bajo un esquema que nos caracteriza como mexicanos. Seguir haciendo negocios con calidad y calidez humana, siempre poniendo, obviamente, al ser humano como eje de nuestro crecimiento, porque el transporte es un modo y un estilo de vida. Ese sería mi comentario, Martín.
Muchas gracias, Jorge, la verdad, excelentes comentarios. Te quería hacer una pregunta porque sacaste varios temas interesantes desde la transferencia de tecnología, el impulso a mejorar las operaciones, tanto como requisito por el cliente, como también simplemente para ofrecer un mejor servicio a todos los clientes que tienes. En un momento tuvimos una conversación sobre tu perspectiva de la seguridad vial y me gustaría que nos dieras un poco tu punto de vista en este tema que yo sé que lo toman muy en serio en la Alianza Trayecto y tanto por eso tienen su colegio de capacitación y todo lo demás, pero este concepto de seguridad vial, especialmente porque a veces en Estados Unidos no sé por qué, pero se considera que cualquier transportista mexicano pues, puede ser un transportista inseguro o no capacitado. Entonces, un poco tu perspectiva desde ahí, por favor. Gracias.
Gracias. Nosotros decidimos hace más de 20 años comprometernos con la seguridad y con el lema de que la seguridad no es negociable, la seguridad es mandatoria. Nosotros queremos partir de la premisa de la seguridad en la aviación. La seguridad en la aviación es cero tolerancia a accidentes. Así lo vemos nosotros. Entonces, creamos se ha ido mejorando un programa permanente de seguridad que damos una capacitación por semana mandatoria a los casi 4,000 operadores y no pueden salir a viaje si no cumplen con esa capacitación. Entonces, hemos importado algunos procesos y tecnologías tanto de Europa como de Estados Unidos para análisis de accidentes, para prevención. Capacitamos con simuladores, con champion drivers a bordo. En lo que es la frontera, renovamos 220 camiones transfer a camiones nuevos, day cabs, con transmisiones automáticas, con sensores de proximidad, porque realmente vemos que la seguridad no es negociable. Debemos de partir de cero accidentes. Si a cualquiera de los que estamos en este foro nos dijeran, oye, ¿por cada cuántos despegues de avión te subes al avión? Si te dicen, oye, no, un avión se cae cada 10,000 despegues o 100,000, ya con ese margen ya no me subo al avión, ¿verdad? Entonces, esa es la filosofía que tenemos. Tratar, obviamente seguimos teniendo accidentes, pero bueno, estamos en continuo mejoramiento y compromiso de fondo en lo que es la seguridad.
Muchas gracias, Jorge. Me parece que es algo que cada vez que tengo la oportunidad de participar en los eventos de Canacar y en distintos foros en México, se nota claramente en la industria en general esta perspectiva, ¿no? De mejorar la operación, de profesionalizar al chofer, de asegurar de que todo vaya, todo opere como debe de ser, porque además los siniestros pues, son costosos, como bien sabemos. No estamos en el negocio de tener accidentes, estamos en el negocio de transportar la carga a los clientes.
Así es. Lo que nosotros creemos que en un futuro, y estamos muy entusiasmados con este TEMEC, no sé si en un año, en 5, en 10 o en 20, pero el transporte va a tener que ser libre, como lo dijo Dan, libre de papeles. El que se haya adicionado un capítulo de aduanas y facilitación de comercio, esa es una gran esperanza, donde los transportistas de América del Norte, hagamos una gran alianza y podamos circular con gente muy profesional, con gente de primera línea para mantener a la sociedad segura. Tenemos una gran responsabilidad al ser nuestras unidades tan grandes con la sociedad y con nuestra gente.
Muchas gracias. I'm gonna switch into English, and we are having lots of questions coming in, but I want to thank all three speakers for these sort of introductory remarks. I like to see that there's sort of this general trend as to the positivism of what NAFTA meant, a positive outlook also for USMCA, and the importance of having this sort of rule-based environment in which we can operate, and it provides a level of certainty for all your operations, and more importantly, to the operations of your customers as well, who are counting on you. We have a question, and I'm going to do this in Spanish first. It's a Spanish question. Tomando en cuenta los antecedentes del Telecán NAFTA y considerando los cambios del TEMEC USMCA ante una realidad económica distinta, ¿cuáles son sus opiniones del impacto al autotransporte interfronterizo? Y aquí me imagino que está en particular hablando con todo este challenge del COVID y todo, pero en términos generales. Derek, do you want to go first?
Sure, I'll jump in. Look, there's no question that we're in a different economy right now, in a different, place with this pandemic. But I am strongly of the opinion that we are a heck of a lot better figuring out how to deal with the future state in a COVID environment and a COVID economy with USMCA in place than we would be if we did not have it. The simple reality is that both in Canada, Mexico, and the US is throughout the pandemic, there is no work from home option for the professional driver. And they have continued to deliver. They've continued to keep those three economies moving. They've continued to serve the citizens of their respective countries. And having USMCA as a framework allows us to do that with even greater confidence going forward. I think with COVID, you're going to see supply chain changes. You'll see more nearshoring as people really think about how far flung they want to have their supply chain and their suppliers. And what better time to have an agreement in place between our countries to say we're open for business. We welcome that investment in North America. The transport community has proven during COVID that we can stay open for business and deliver their freight. The advancements we're making, and I'll go back to a question you asked both Jorge and Dan around, where do you think the biggest efficiencies are? I mean, I think if we can use USMCA and put that behind us, what it really does is allows us to get back to focusing on the improvements yet to be made. We need to get closer every day to a unified customs process. We need to have synergies where we're not stopping loads twice or three times, to have disparate agencies in Mexico and the US have a second or third or fourth look at the same cargo. We need to go increasingly paperless, as Dan mentioned and Jorge mentioned previously. There are things we can do that take very important time out of every shipment and make efficiencies grow, environmental impacts lessen, and our customers' goods get to market even quicker. And by getting USMCA in the rearview mirror, we can now focus on the more tactical things yet to be done. USMCA addresses some of those, not all of those, but it gives us a framework to work within. And so, look, I think it is a new normal, and we better all buckle in and admit that. I think if we're ignoring that reality, we're being a bit naive. But with USMCA, we have a structure to focus on a strong North American trading bloc between Mexico, Canada, and the US.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And you raise a really big point that I want to touch upon, which is, and I want to ask Jorge real quick, sort of shift the presentation around. Jorge, there's this, Derek raised this issue of nearshoring. And basically the concept of nearshoring is, we sort of shorten the supply chains by bringing more manufacturing into North America. And USMCA might actually push that because of some of the, requirements in the manufacturing content. But Jorge, do you see the Mexican government, or do you see an initiative in Mexico to sort of, in your own country, to sort of push for nearshoring?
La verdad es que desde la iniciativa privada estamos empujando para que ese nearshoring se haga una realidad, que haya manera de traer a este bloque más producción y que podamos ser el bloque más importante del mundo. Estamos trabajando y cabildeando mucho con este nuevo gobierno, un gobierno que nos está implicando algunos retos, pero estamos también decididos a lograrlo con este gobierno o a pesar de este gobierno, de lograr que se den las condiciones de inversión extranjera directa a nuestro país, que es todo un reto. Y por otro lado también vemos que algunos puntos de los nuevos capítulos, como el laboral, como el de comercio digital o el de pequeñas y medianas empresas, que son capítulos nuevos en el TEMEC, eso va a seguir potencializando a México, va a seguir obligándonos, forzándonos, retándonos a hacer las cosas diferente y a estándares de calidad mundial. La verdad es que en México la gente es realmente trabajadora, entusiasta, tenemos una resiliencia impresionante. Pasan huracanes, temblores, cambios drásticos de gobierno, y aquí seguimos echados para adelante, y obviamente con nuestros socios de Estados Unidos y Canadá, pues nos fortalece mucho ese entusiasmo.
Muchas gracias, y creo que diste en el clavo, porque el tema es de trabajar conjuntamente como región y la importancia de fortalecer esas relaciones, y creo que el TEMEC, el tratado, lo hace de esta manera. Dan, do you want to throw something in, or you want me to go ahead?
I agree. And you know, rising tide raises all ships, and I think we proved that with this rising tide, both from a performance perspective for the industry, from a safety perspective, we're learning from each other. We're becoming better all the time. This nearshoring is definitely going to play to our advantage. One of the negatives of that, I'm happy for it because I'm a provider in this North American economy. But on a global basis, I don't want to see that global trade get so restricted, because that's where divisiveness happens in the world. The more, because the more you make something easy to trade, do, like I said earlier, the more you'll do of it. And then the more you depend upon each other, you're less likely to get into confrontations in a significant way. You can have disagreements, but so that's one of the downsides that I'm nervous about. One of the points I forgot to mention before, a problem with the USMCA that I'd like to see resolved. We still have not resolved the in-transit pilot program. For those that don't know what that is, it's Canadians, we go through each other's country using the shortest route possible, the most efficient route. For example, if you're going from Michigan to Buffalo or Rochester or Boston, it's shorter to go in transit through Ontario and continue on your journey. Fuel efficient, all of those things. After 9/11, we have been substantially restricted from doing in-transit crossing at Detroit or the Port Huron Gateway going to Western Canada. Prior to 9/11, probably 70% of my trucks that were going to Western Canada would travel through the US, both from a distance perspective, access to infrastructure, fuel economy, all of those things. So we need to get that resolved again, because right now the American carriers can go in transit through Canada, and we're severely restricted going in transit through the United States. And that it doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree. And it seems that it's, in one sense, it's part of this digital environment that has restricted us into not being able to do it because of the way the system is designed. And I agree, we need there's some work to be done there. I'm going to ask another question, and actually I'm going to start with you, Dan, if that's okay. We got a question from a good friend of all of ours, Bob Costello here. It says, have you seen an uptick in cross-border freight in recent months after falling off from COVID-19?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It fell like a stone. And it's back almost, I would say, to where it was. In fact, if you look at some of the numbers that came out recently, there was a 6-week snapshot of data that was sent out. And the load difference from last year, the 6 weeks, to this year was 1 load difference.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. So it's back. I'm driving truck on occasion, and I won't explain as to why, but I'm doing that to sort of lead by example. I delivered a load of hospital furniture to a field hospital in New York City to show my drivers not to be afraid.
Excellent.
The traffic has come back tremendously.
Okay, great. Derek, do you have the same experience?
We saw the same drop off. And obviously we do business in both borders, but Mexico is much larger for us than Canada is. We saw a pretty meaningful drop off during the early stages of COVID. I think Mexico is unique because of how much of that is automotive, and southbound, or the source of northbound trailer availability is southbound automotive moves, and automotive was impacted disproportionately during COVID. And so it really limited the ability. And although there was northbound demand to be had, it was hard to service it all because of southbound limitations, both with truck and car OEMs. We're now seeing that come back online, and we're seeing that growth coming back. So we're pretty excited about it. I don't think we've yet seen, nearshoring will be a multi-year process, not a multi-month one, but we'll see incremental volumes from that as it takes place. But we love the trend line right now that we're seeing relative to cross-border business in general. For us, it increases our length of haul. It gives us longer loads to haul into and out of Mexico. It's driver-friendly freight, and it supports our terminal network. We have terminals across the southern border. We have almost a 100-acre terminal in Laredo. It is nearing 100 acres now of developed land that is the largest on the southern border. And so, we need and want that volume to come back. We're seeing it increase daily. It's not quite back to where the Canadian example was that Dan just gave, but it's not far from it, and we're on our way.
Excellent, thank you. Jorge, would you like to comment also?
Sí, el mes de abril y mayo fueron meses realmente muy complicados para el transporte en México. Te puedo hablar de una caída entre 35 y 40% de los movimientos. Y el mes de junio empezó a repuntar, julio va bien, vemos un comercio más dinámico. En México, a diferencia de Canadá y en Estados Unidos, enfrentamos una serie de retos que es la infraestructura carretera, tiene áreas de oportunidad, la seguridad en las mismas carreteras, otra área de oportunidad, pero el movimiento sigue y nosotros como Canacar, Cámara Nacional del Autotransporte, decimos que todos nuestros operadores son verdaderos héroes porque han salido todos los días, a pesar de enfermedad y a pesar de muchos retos en contra, a dar todo por la sociedad y hago un reconocimiento público a nuestros héroes, a nuestros operadores. Y bueno, estamos seguros que esto va a seguir mejorando, pero no al nivel, al menos este año y el primer semestre del próximo año, no vemos una recuperación como la que traíamos en el último trimestre del año pasado. Estamos trabajando muy fuerte conjuntamente con nuestros socios comerciales. Vamos bien, pero hay un desbalance también entre las importaciones, entre el northbound y el southbound, que bueno, tendremos que irlo viendo logísticamente cómo arreglarlo.
Okay, thank you very much. Very good question. Very good answer, actually, in the sense of, I think, very complete, and there's agreement as to what the impact of COVID-19 has been and the somewhat recovery. Let's hope it continues. Let's hope that we can get a handle on the expansion of this terrible virus and really control it for the future of our trade agreement, but also for the health of our citizens all the way. We're almost to the time. I wanted to briefly introduce Matthias Metz just to give a quick closing remarks, and then I'll close out the event. Matthias?
Yeah, thank you very much, Martin, and hello to everyone from the headquarters of the RIU in Geneva here. I was just going to say, great debate. Thank you to great speakers. Thank you for all the questions. And I will be very brief, Martin. Trade is the lifeblood of the economy, and road transport drives the economy, like literally. I think it was a great discussion, and we all agree that we need a successful implementation of the USMCA trade agreement, and we can essentially use the RIU to debate, to coordinate, and to advocate to make it right. So we're looking forward to working very closely together with all of you, much, much more closely, either as part of the IRU membership and with our associations in the Americas. So I would simply like to say thank you, extend greetings from our President and the Secretary General, and back to you, Martin, to close it all up. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias. And yes, obviously, it's part of the initiative here of the IRU and the Americas is to assist in the coordination. We've been doing some of that in increasing the communication between CTA, ATA, and CONACAR quite clearly. We want to continue that also with some of our friends from South America for sure, where we have these opportunities. And just want to thank again, you know, an incredible panel of speakers. I mean, I think we're very fortunate at having three of the top leaders from North America in trucking and transportation generally give us their insight, their positivism. To me, it has been very good. We'd like to take a polling question and see again if we can get to 100% now before I close it out, and we'll do this quickly. Again, do you think USMCA, after hearing our speakers talk about it, will improve cross-border trade and transportation in comparison to NAFTA? Go ahead and vote, please. It takes a little while to tabulate.
Martine, while you're taking that vote, would it be all right if there was one comment that kind of captures about 8 questions we didn't get to? Would that be all right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Go ahead.
So there's several different versions of questions about operating in the U.S. and the impact of safety and specifically insurance was mentioned several times. So for all of you out there listening, I just want to make sure everybody's clear that the insurance market in the U.S. is about as difficult a market as it's ever been in our history. Over the last year, you've seen rates of insurance go up 50 to 150% on average. That's carrier after carrier after carrier. As recently as yesterday, Landstar, very large multinational company that does very good work, announced in their release that their insurance rates went up by $14 million per year. That is not an outlier. That is a real number, and we're seeing it across carriers. So I only say it to my brothers on the Mexican side of the border or in Canada. As you think about doing business in the U.S., you're not getting picked on. We're all in the same boat together. It's a tough market.
Yeah, I think, you know, again, I think this is one of those issues we need to be careful with. But yes, it is a tough market. And it was one of those issues that came up early on in NAFTA. You know, once they started the pilot program was, for example, how can you get coverage if you don't have any experience operations in the U.S., for example, right? And so it is a very tough market and getting tougher. And part of it has to do also with these, you know, nuclear settlements that are taking place in our legal system in the U.S., which is a major challenge as well. Did we get a final result on the polling question there? Well, there we go. I think we actually moved the bar even a little further. I think we're at 80 something. Now we're at 95%. So a positive development. Again, Derek, Dan, Jorge, thank you very much. I want to thank the team back in Geneva, the support team that put all this together, Laura, you know, David, Matthias, John Kidd, and Fanny, and all the other people. I want to give a special round of applause and thank you to Jose Luis Villanueva, who did the interpreting. He does a fantastic job. I actually met him in Argentina when he was doing some stuff there. And this is a conversation that will continue, obviously. We'll keep this moving. We want to recreate some of the stuff that we had in the past to bring the three associations closer together in meetings, be they virtually or physically. And I think it's important that we do so we have this conversation, and especially as we move forward in working with this committee that has been established under USMCA to really have a close working relationship with government and a sort of a one-to-one conversation rather than a top-down type thing, but that we really are able to listen and provide input at the same time. So with that, I thank you, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much. And thank you for
Bye,
everybody who participated, the entire audience. You've been fantastic. Great questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all the questions. There were tons of them, as Derek mentioned, but we'll get to them at some point. And if you have any questions, please let me know. If you have my contact information, we'll be happy to get you some information. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.